An untrained dog will bark and wake you up in the morning. And it'll bark at nothing and annoy you throughout the day. It will shed on your furniture. It will take a shit and piss on your carpet. It'll hump your furniture. It'll give you unwanted puppies. It will attract fleas into the house. Why does the dog do this? Well, because it's a dog. And that's what dogs do. So when we say, bad dog, go outside, go lay down, is it really a bad dog? Well, in my opinion, no. You can't moralize the behavior of an instinctual animal, because the essence of dogness simply does what it does, unless you train it professionally to do otherwise. But that's kind of what humans are, you see. Humans are lustful. Humans are violent. Humans are fleshly and egotistical, etc. Because our essence is of humanness. So, am I immoral for impregnating a woman? Or am I immoral for being violent to somebody, etc.? Well, the thing is, I am no more immoral than the dog is immoral. Because you could say, well, unlike the dog, you have reason. Oh, do I? Well, the reason that I possess doesn't seem to stop these emotions from arising in the first place, even if I do not act on it. I committed adultery in my heart, so to speak. Or I murdered my brother in my own mind, so to speak, even though I didn't act out on it. We all have this interior diabolism that is rotten at its root, to the very core, inside of us. And most people just don't know it because we don't verbalize it. We take what somebody verbalizes as if it's the truth of who they are, but it is the truth that they want to be perceived as, and it's therefore a lie. We think that if we mind our manners and dot our I's and cross our T's and be polite, that somehow means something. But you know something? If we had the power to read minds, everybody would hate each other. If we were to leave a tape recorder device after we leave a room and we hear what people say behind our backs when we return to pick it up a few days later without their knowledge, you would hate everybody. If only our ears can astral project into a room where people are talking about us. If only we could read minds. I guarantee you, if you were to be able to see what the average person does when he is in isolation, or she is in isolation, you would think far less of them, because you would see them behave like a bizarre animal. Bad human. You're gonna go to hell. You're immoral. But even though we try our damnedest to come off as decent human beings to others, and we want to be perceived well, that's just so we could survive, because we require the cooperation of other people in order to get by in this world, for financial reasons, or to suck up to the boss and be a good subordinate. See, there's an ulterior motive for why we have to come off as decent. But everything bad that we do in our interiority that nobody can see, but you know it to be true for yourself, as do I. You have to assume that if I know my interior to be diabolical, and you know your interior to be diabolical to some degree, you have to assume that everybody has the same interiority. And even though they're smiling and they're coming off decent, what's on their inside is terrifying. And they try to fight it every step of the way. Some of us can't even do that. We just have to show our true colors. And then people act surprised, as if it wasn't there. Like an interior disease that only the person knew, but then when it finally comes out in the form of an outburst, people are surprised. Oh, just when you think you know a guy. But what's the point of this? Point is, the nature of the 7 deadly sins, and how we have been socially engineered by way of religion to have a guilty conscience thereby, is completely faultless. You see, we are not blameworthy, because when it comes to the relationship dynamic of creator, creation, and creature, we live in the realm of effects where everything is the byproduct of the ultimate cause, which is the creator. And if you look at the behavior of what the creation does and us being individual creatures within it, we were preordained by evil. But because of duality, we were also preordained by good. In fact, you couldn't have good without evil, because you must have contrast in order to make differentiations. If I am a good person, then it is only because I know what it's like to be a bad person and I'm not being that at this time. But you couldn't really have one without the other. Of course, we all try to be good. But in this world of contrast, where we know what true evil is, to be good is merely the absence of evil. But why do we live in a world where you have to have contrast to begin with, where there is an actual evil that exists within us? And then we think we're all high and mighty by saying that, oh, I'm good, I'm moral. Yeah, maybe externally at that particular moment, but internally is a whole nother story. But we were made this way. We were at war with the flesh because our human behavior that is sinful, we can't necessarily say that it's immoral, because they are actually the byproducts of the natural laws of nature, which is pure instinctual necessity. We feel angry because something is an immediate threat to our survival. We feel lustful because it promotes the perpetuation of the species. We feel envy because that person is surviving better than us, and that needs to either be a motivating catalyst to be more like them or take what's theirs, etc., etc. You know where I'm going with this. It's all the byproduct of the state of nature, which is cruel, brutish, and short. And our state of morality, that we call us being a good person, is only a temporary relief from evil doing. And you're only able to, and this is actually fucked up, because the only reason why we say that we are good, moral, just, truthful, etc., is because we live in a world that's fucked up, that has the opposite by the absence thereof. So we only know these things by way of contrast. Which goes to show that when we self-aggrandize ourselves in regards to being just, we know that we had to try really hard to be in that state, because it's ultimately unnatural for humans. That's why most people, if you observe them exteriorly or interiorly, you find that they fall victim to every vice as their natural nature. Falsehood, being a dick to other people, being vulgar, being ungentlemanly, being unintelligent, being lazy. All of these things are just commonplace. And if we find the minority of cases where we ourselves, or some people we know, are the opposite, that's simply the fact that they have overcome their true nature by being the absence thereof with every strength that comes from the fiber of their being. Where they use so much strength to overcome their natural selves. But are we immoral? I'm no more immoral for the things that I do that are sinful than the dog is immoral for humping the stuffed animal. The only difference is we have a principle of individuation and an internal monologue where we have this delusion of free choice where we think that we can deliberate the absence of our true barbarous human nature. And if we could refrain and show great restraint in not behaving like a Homo sapien in the state of nature, then we call ourselves good. But we have to ask ourselves, why did the Creator have this byproduct called creation and creature, which is an effect of that causality, design us to be this way? And then everybody, therefore, will fall short in their minds to the glory of God and the splendor of heaven, and instead get eternal damnation because they didn't live up to God's standard, because God put everything scripturally against the unintelligent design whereby he is at fault. For instance, he made it mandatory that we should be lustful. And then, that's original sin. And it's your fault that we're fallen, and it's your fault, woman, that you have childbirth pains. You know why? Because your kind, Eve, ate from the fruit. Right, so at the end of the day, it's your fault. You're fallen because of your sinful nature, especially lust. But we were designed to be that way. We were designed to be angry. We were designed to be violent. In fact, if you look at human history up until this point, and you were to start over from scratch, everything would happen exactly the way that it did up until this point. Every time you would reset it and want to start over, the same shit would happen, because it couldn't have happened otherwise, because it was all by design. The method to the madness is madness itself. And it is designed to gaslight you into thinking that you are a sick, depraved, subhuman animal. And you deserve to be guilty, and you deserve to be punished in hellfire for eternity. And they do this because they have given you a specific bestial nature that is according to the flesh that the demiurge made. It designed it to be an animal. And when you behave animalistically, as animals are inevitably going to do, then it feeds on your guilt, and it feeds on your repentance, and it feeds on your extreme fear of being punished in the afterlife. And that's why everything is set up against the natural order on purpose. The metaphysical component that made the natural order designed language to create a moral doctrine to go against the natural order deliberately, just so it can feed on your guilt and you're begging for forgiveness in your fear of going to hell. And based upon the fear being the catalyst, it can basically make you a slave. And that's why it caused everything, or it caused the doctrinal moral law to be juxtaposed to the natural necessity of the laws of nature. So it's giving you the illusion of free choice when it comes to two ultimate evils. Ultimate evil one is behave like your natural animal. And choice number two is to be in obedience to the demiurgic moral laws and not commit 7 deadly sins and all that, which just causes psychological torment. Because to sin, or I mean to not to sin, I'm convinced is actually impossible. And if we do everything in our power not to sin, it is not because we are good, but we have found temporary relief from the natural order in which we were fashioned. Blood, flesh, semen, piss, and excrement on our insides was calcified by a diabolical mind that wanted us to suffer, and wanted us to suffer even more so in going against our natural design that makes us suffer. And then we suffer even more so because it's like, oh no, we can't sin. Oh, but it's impossible not to sin, right? If you don't want an organism to be lustful, then you don't design them to be lustful and have, blue balls and biological punishments. If you don't want them to be gluttony, you don't give them, for instance, taste buds. If you don't want them to be lustful, you don't give them genitals with all kinds of pleasure receptors. Like, for example, what's the deal with the clitoris as far as I know? The clitoris doesn't serve any other purpose but to give the woman pleasure, right? But then we can't be lustful. Well, if we weren't supposed to be lustful, then you didn't have to make sex feel so good, did you? If you didn't want us to be gluttony, you didn't have to make it taste so good, did you? If you don't want us to be angry, maybe you shouldn't have created a world that pisses me the fuck off, didn't you? You see where I'm going with this? So, if I am to try to overcome my flesh, I do so not in a state of guilt. Because I know that my spirit is the light of consciousness, but the flesh is pure darkness, and matter is pure darkness, and I know that the darkness is not me. For I am the spiritual light. So therefore, when I look at my flesh as an impediment that impinges upon my consciousness, I don't take it much further than that. Because when the darkness takes control and makes me do what darkness does, I know that it is the darkness that did it, and the light must overcome the darkness. But the confusion that most religious people have is they believe that they bear responsibility for the things that the darkness does, when really the darkness has a mind of its own that goes against the well-being of our self-determinism, you see. So, when it comes to that sick idea that God made us be tempted by sin to test our strength, to see if we can overcome it, to see if we're worthy of Him and worthy of heaven, that's absolutely sick. And I renounce all that nonsense. It's completely stupid and irrational for me to be apologetic about things that have nothing to do with my true nature, that have been superimposed. In the same way, arthritic calcification that causes pain in the joints has nothing to do with the bone structure and the tenets themselves, but it's a hardened superimposition on that area that causes pain, but you don't identify with the arthritis. You see it as a sort of add-on that's inflammatory and incendiary, but you don't identify with it. See, that's the thing when it comes to the so-called sinful nature for which I have no control. If I am tempted or I fall into sin, I know that it's just a inflammatory and incendiary superimposition that is an add-on that exists for no other purpose but to dim the light of my consciousness by way of making me suffer so, but it has nothing to do with me. I look at my elbow on the armrest, but I am not the elbow nor the armrest, but yet I experience my elbow on the armrest. Okay. This is the same with sin. There's no reason to feel guilty because the archons are going to feed off of it. But even if you're unapologetic and self-righteous about it, and you're a hedonistic, orgiastic, sensory gratification type of a person, the archons are going to feed on that too, because it's going to deplete you. See, dispassion is the greatest virtue. Indifference is the greatest virtue. Maintained contentment is the greatest virtue, because the archons can't feed off of that. But they'll feed off of your guilt, or if you do the opposite, they'll feed off of your self-righteousness. They feed on emotional expenditures. Positive or negative. But dispassion is true beauty. Anyway, if there's anything I could say that I truly love, it is the fact that when it comes to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, knowing the difference thereof, I feel that I have taken the bite of that forbidden fruit, which is the Gnosis that provides just that, being like God and knowing good and evil, or in other words, knowing the difference between the corruption of this fallen world that was really, well, to say fallen is an understatement. It was really fucked up since its conception. And it was made to be like that, but the point is, I truly am able to see the difference between what is pure spiritual goodness that belongs to the pre-creation versus the aberration of the downward darkness, which is the prison that we find ourselves in. When you truly take a bite of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and knowing the difference thereof, that's the true Gnosis, because then you're able to see that there truly is a difference between good and evil. There truly is a war of light and darkness, and all of the so-called non-duality people, they want you to believe that to make a distinction between good and evil is a sign of ignorance, but really it's these so-called non-dualists that are really in ignorance. because there truly is a duality here. You have truth and you have falsehood. You have freedom and you have slavery. Okay, where you have one thing, you have to have the opposite. But the true truth, or the true freedom, the true beauty, has nothing to do with the linguistics of doctrinal language that we use. For instance, I pick up a book and I say, oh, I found the truth. No. The truth is the voluptuous void, which is a luminous abyss of oceanic blackness. And this voluptuous, luminous void is what the Gnostics referred to as the Father, or the All, or the Monad. It had nothing to do with matter. It was the supreme state prior to the existence of the physical world and the fall of Sophia, by creating something in which the Father did not give permission, which is this physical world. Okay? So when I talk about the voluptuous, luminous void, I'm talking about the Father of the All, which in my estimation is the true divinity. And it is the nothingness. Because when we say the nothingness or no thing is, we are speaking upon something qualitative. And that is the fullness of the pleroma, which is completely empty, but yet it is filled with fullness. This is that beauty that we feel into when we separate ourselves through meditation from our physical bodies and from our mind. This is the beauty that we feel when we're on the verge of falling asleep at night and we get that moment of ecstasy prior to going completely unconscious. The void is overlayered upon everything, and it is omnipresent. But it has nothing to do with matter, nor does it have to do with the ether of the empty space that we see. For divinity is never what's in front of your eyes, but divinity is rather what's behind your eyes. Think about it. Imagine you can look behind your eyes. What do you see? You see blackness. You see light. You see the beauty, which is the fullness, but yet it is nothing at all. And that's consciousness. That's Shiva. That's the Om that the ancient scriptures spoke about, but most people don't understand what's really being said. When they talk about the oneness, they're not talking about the oneness of spirit as counter-distinctive from the physical world. They confuse the idea of oneness, these silly non-dualists, to be I am everything. You are me, I am you, and there's no separation between you, me, or humanity at large, and the trees, and hell, even the dog shit on the side of the road is divine, because everything's one, and everything comes from God. No. They got the false oneness. When I talk about the monad, when I'm talking about the voluptuous void of its luminous light that shines in the darkness behind our eyes, I'm talking about the realm of pure spirit, of pure Brahma, or undifferentiated consciousness. But people take the idea of undifferentiated consciousness and they mistake it with, oh, the consciousness that comprises my ego and who I perceive myself to be is nothing more than who you are, and we're all this oneness, and we're just God experiencing itself. It's like, that's not what I'm talking about. You silly fucking goose. That's not what I'm talking about. But these things are a bit difficult to explain. I'm not going to lie. I've done my best. But my principle of individuation is nothing more than the ego. Your principle of individuation is nothing but the ego. But when I talk about undifferentiated consciousness, I'm not talking about anything that has to do with personhood. Whether we're taking all persons and putting them together under the abstraction of humanity and the consciousness involved therein, I'm not talking about human consciousness. I'm not talking about anything that has to do with linguistics. Talking about the divine spark that is in the heart of the spirit of man that is completely unconscious and suffering in this realm if they have not yet awakened, because this realm has put them in a slumber. And when I say oneness and undifferentiated consciousness, I'm talking about your divine spark and my divine spark that is enslaved within this realm. Some of us have been able to bring our lucidity back up to the level where we are at least half conscious, or maybe we're a quarter conscious, but we mistake ourselves for being completely awake. Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm not even a quarter way conscious. But even though I'm not even a quarter way conscious, because of the detriment that the amnesia and the trauma has done upon my spirit throughout the incarnation processes in this world, if I am awake even 20% right now, and that wouldn't surprise me, it is much better to be 20% lucid than to be 0% lucid, because that's where most people are at. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But you have people out there that are barely even lucid at all, but they consider themselves to be completely enlightened. And they let the idealism of their delusional linguistics, of their ego, take them for a fucking ride. And they misunderstand things, man. They don't understand true oneness. It's not oneness of the earth and oneness of humanity or anything fucking stupid like that. And when I say love, truth, freedom, beauty, and morality, it has nothing to do with anything that we experience here doctrinally or ideologically here on earth. It's like, if you can just go into the voluptuous void, if only for a moment, and know what I'm talking about, and you go there, and even though it is the fullness of emptiness, the pleroma, you go there and you feel into the bliss of that impersonality. That was the eternity that we are, that we have estranged ourselves from by coming into the downward darkness, which is this corrupted earth. Okay? But regardless, I find that the love, truth, freedom, beauty, and morality, what it truly is the nothingness. It is the Father that the Gnostics spoke about. It was the all that the Gnostics spoke about. It was the monad that the Gnostics spoke about, and you're able to tap into that pleromic fullness simply by going into the eternity of who you know that you already are. That has nothing to do with the body or the ego or language or anything like that. And then you're able to entertain the great invisible spirit that belongs to the incorruptible race. Spiritual race, that is. And you're able to even though it's hard with your earthly mind, you still meditate and entertain the paradox that truth, and the ultimate truth, is the absence of language. Freedom, and the ultimate freedom, is the absence of things. Right? Morality and true morality is complete blissful indifference and non-doership. Okay? True beauty is the blackness that takes me to the emptiness that is the pleroma of divine nothingness. That's true beauty. But this isn't an atheistic afterlife, because that would entail a nothingness that is literally a nothingness. This type of nothingness is more esoteric because it indicates the no thing, because there's no sensory integration, there's no matter, there's no language, but it is qualitatively the fullness of divinity itself. And that's where the truth is. That's where love is. That's where beauty is. Anything that's a positive quality, put it there, but don't put it out there. Neither the interiority of your sense of self nor the exteriority of the outside world bears comparison to the divine nothingness in which I speak.